Hey guys, I'm Dan from ShastaBubba Adventures, and this is the third video in a series that's all about helping you to overcome fear and anxiety in the wilderness. And today we're going to be talking about mindfulness. Now I'm going to make my best attempt to have this be a standalone video, but in all honesty, it probably will make more sense to you if you've watched the second video that was about managing panic attacks, and specifically the piece that's about the cycle of focus, because we're going to be coming back to that and talking about two deeper meanings of that cycle of focus. If this topic interests you, don't forget to subscribe so that you don't miss out on future episodes, and thanks for watching. So mindfulness is a simple concept, but it has very broad implications. And I think of it as a philosophy of life. And it's sort of like that old saying to stop and smell the roses. So you know that good things happen in our lives, but if we aren't present and paying attention when they happen, we don't fully experience them. So an example might be if I was looking forward to a favorite meal, whether it's something I make myself at home or a restaurant that I love to go to, and I'm really anticipating this and looking forward to it, and here is the actual meal. And I take the first bite and I savor that and I love this stuff. It's so good. And then I get distracted either by the conversation or the television or the music playing. And before I know it, I've eaten the entire rest of the meal and hardly noticed it. So that's kind of what we're talking about, is the notion about being fully present in order to experience a good thing. And some people go so far as to say that this is the secret to happiness, because how would I ever be truly happy if I'm not fully present when those good things are going on? So mindfulness is all about being present in the moment and not allowing yourself to get lost in the distractions of the past or the future. So what does this have to do with anxiety? Well, I believe it was the Dalai Lama who said that if you are depressed, you are living in the past. If you're anxious, you're living in the future. And so working at training our minds to do a better job of staying present in the moment has a great deal of implication on overcoming both depression and anxiety. Now I have an equation that I like to use just to make this a little more clear, and it goes like this. My experience of pain, and this is any pain, whether physical or emotional, my experience of pain is equal to memory plus the present plus anticipation. So an example of this would be that I personally happen to have kind of weak ankles. So that means I'm prone to rolling them a lot. And I've had this condition my whole life, so I've gotten pretty good at catching myself when I step wrong and roll the ankle and not doing any actual damage. However, there certainly have been times in the past when I stepped wrong, twisted the ankle, and actually sprained it and was laid up for a week. So I can be walking along any smooth trail with no rocks in the way and step wrong and whoop, there it goes. And like I say, 9 times out of 10, I catch myself and there's no damage and no pain, but I still have a big reaction, right? I'm like, oh. So why am I having a big reaction if in the present there's no damage and no pain? Well, it's because I'm already connecting it to those few times in the past when I did sprain it badly and was in a lot of pain. And I'm already thinking ahead to the future of how bad does it hurt? Am I going to be laid up for a few days? What am I going to do about getting around? All those thoughts that don't have anything to do with what is actually going on in that present. So that's the idea, is if I can stay in that present moment and not have the past and the future infect the present moment, then it's not so difficult to deal with. So that's a physical example. Let's talk about an emotional example. Let's say I'm doing some meditation and all of a sudden the idea pops into my head that it's almost the end of the month and it's time to pay bills. And immediately my heart starts racing and I start feeling this fear reaction. What if I don't have enough money to pay my bills, right? Well, as it happens, this month I have enough in the bank to cover the bills. There's no problem. So again, why am I having that big reaction? Well, it's because I'm connecting it to the times in the past when I didn't have enough and it was quite a strain and a struggle to get through. And also, I'm thinking about the future of when am I ever going to get to that point when I don't have to worry about finances. So the idea is, if I can get rid of that and get rid of that and only deal with what is actually going on in the present, that lowers my overall experience of pain. So the challenge of this is actually getting good at staying present in the moment. A lot of times, the first time that we explain this to people, they might do a quick self-assessment and think, well, I think I'm pretty good about this. I think probably 70-80% of the time I'm present in the moment. But the more you practice this and really pay attention to this mindful awareness, the more you discover how really rarely we are completely in the moment and not getting lost in the past or the future. I've been practicing this mindful meditation for about 10 years now, and I think I'm up to about 3% of the time, maybe, that I'm truly mindfully present. And so really it takes practice and exercises to train ourselves to be more mindfully present. So how do you do that? Well, I need to go back to my office and use the whiteboard to talk about 2 deeper meanings of that cycle of focus in order to explain that. So I wanted to come back to this thing. You remember this from the last video. I talked about this cycle of focus, how we work at keeping our focus just on our breath, not allowing the brain to be distracted, but our brains are going to be distracted. And when I have the awareness that I'm thinking about something else, to just release the distraction and go back to focus on my breathing and not allow myself to go off into some type of self-judgment. So I want to come back to this and talk about 2 deeper meanings of this that apply to mindfulness. And the first is that in the beginning, when I notice that my brain is distracted, but I'm not judging that, I'm just letting go of it and going back to my breathing, what I'm actually doing there is practicing something called self-compassion, because I am working at accepting this one little tiny flaw about myself, that my brain is not capable of staying perfectly focused on my breathing, and every time I have a distraction, that's evidence of this flaw in who I am. And in the beginning, it's only a tiny thing that I'm working at accepting, but over time, as I work at this and practice meditation, that expands outward. And I then work at accepting all of my human flaws and limitations. And there's this nice feedback loop that as I'm working at accepting that I am not perfect, I'm also working at being less judgmental and critical of others and recognizing that they aren't perfect too. And that comes back to me as I get less critical and more patient with others. I am less critical and more patient with myself as well. Now, where this gets really philosophical is that as I'm working at accepting that I'm not perfect and other people aren't perfect, I'm also working at accepting that life isn't perfect. So here's where we touch on that basic tenet of Buddhism, which is saying that pain is inevitable, but suffering is optional, and suffering occurs because of our resistance to pain. So that type of pain can be physical pain, it can be emotional pain. Anything that I am resisting that is just out of my control and just part of what's going on. So you can think about this just hiking on a rainy day, right? The more that I am frustrated and angry about why does it have to be raining every time I go hiking, that's going to make me miserable, right? If I just accept that, okay, it's raining, and now within the context of the rain, what can I control? Well, I can put on my rain gear and maybe duck out of the rain in a tree well and take a break from it. I can focus on the things that are in my control and not waste so much energy being frustrated about the stuff that I can't control. And really, that's all of life, that there are things that we can't control, and the more we focus on those things and wish that they would change, the more we feel frustrated and powerless. If I can focus on what I can control, then I'm not so frustrated, and more importantly, I feel powerful. So one of the deeper meanings is that as I am noticing that my brain is distracted and letting go of that and coming back to my breath, what I'm actually doing is training my mind to be mindfully aware of being in the present, because my breath is in the present. And most of the time, any distraction that comes into my head is the past or the future. What I'm actually doing is training my brain to be mindfully aware. And then I'm wanting to pay attention to that throughout the day, not just when I'm doing my meditation, but the meditation helps me get in that frame of mind, and that's part of why it's useful to start the day with the meditation, because then I do notice it throughout the day when I'm not being present. And some other clues that I run into are like when I get clumsy, if I reach for something and I knock it over instead of grabbing it, or if I'm moving the coffee cup from the counter to the sink and I crash into the dishes in the drainer instead, I want to remind myself to be present in that moment with what I'm actually doing and not thinking about the 2 or 3 things that I'm going to do next. And it's kind of silly, but I have a slogan for this, which is be Zen about it. And so I tell myself, be Zen about it means do this now and don't be thinking about the next 6 things. So mindfulness is not just about being in the present, it's also about that aspect that I touched on of the notion that pain is inevitable, that suffering is optional, and suffering is caused because of our resistance to pain. Another way that I like to say that is, and this is not me, this is from Buddhism, the notion of release the desire for it to be other than it is. So that means let go of wishing that it wasn't the way that it was. So if I am hiking down a very boring, very long trail and I just can't wait for this to be done because I can't stand hiking down this hot, boring trail, well, that's going to make me miserable, and it's not going to make the trail go any faster. So part of being mindfully present is not just, although it's helpful to be noticing things around me and experiencing and enjoying even what I can in a boring hot trail, but also just letting go of that wish that it wasn't going on. It is going on, and wishing it wasn't just makes it bad. So release the desire for it to be other than it is. Now, I've mentioned that there are other exercises, there are different exercises to work on training the brain to be more mindfully present, and certainly the meditation is probably the best tool for that. But I did want to share another fun little exercise with you that you might try, especially if you have kids. And the idea is that you just take a string that's about 4 feet long, or maybe a meter long, and just tie it off so that it creates a circle. And then go out in the woods somewhere and just kind of randomly toss it down on the ground, straighten it out so it forms a circle, and that is roughly a square foot or a square meter. And then sit down with a pen and a piece of paper and just study everything that you see within the boundaries of that string. And maybe set a timer for this. Probably 15 minutes is a good amount of time. That probably will seem like an eternity, but something happens where you are watching for a while and you see just the superficial stuff and you write that down on your piece of paper, what you see, and then maybe removing some of those things that you've written down so you can see underneath that. And after you get past the superficial, you might notice that there's actually a lot more going on within the boundaries of that string than what you noticed at first. When you're done, then reflect on the fact that that is just one tiny little space of the woods. And then think about everything that's going on in the wilderness as we are hiking along that we are not aware of. And it's really a good lesson of how important it is to, if I am present, then I notice so much more. And the flip side is also true, not being present, I miss an awful lot. Okay, so if you've enjoyed this, please subscribe and hit that like button, and then I'll know to make more videos about overcoming anxiety in the wilderness. And thanks for watching. That's it for today. Take care. I'll see you next time.